Hello, everybody. Welcome back to High Value Writing, or welcome to High Value Writing if it's your first visit. Today, I'm really excited because we're going to be learning some new strategies from a friend and colleague of mine who's a professor and is excellent at helping people with their grad school applications. I'll talk to you a little bit more in a moment about what we're going to cover, but first, let me just give a strong welcome to Dr. Bernadine Hernandez, who is an associate professor in the Department of English at the University of New Mexico. Her specialty includes transnational feminism and sexual economies along the US-Mexico borderlands. She also works with American literary studies, border and migration studies, and Chicana Latina literature and sexualities. And we'll find out more that she also works in the public arena as well. She's a public-facing scholar. She cares about her community, and she works with the artist and writer collective Fronteristas, a collective of artists and writers in New Mexico, whose focus is ending migrant detention and abolishing the prison industrial complex through creative activism. So we have quite a lot to learn from Bernadine today. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you were willing to come on and share your expertise. Like I said, Bernadine's a professor, and one of the things she knows a lot about is applying to graduate school. I know a lot of our listeners may be working on an application or may know somebody in their friend, their family who's working on one. And Bernadine's specialty is helping people who are first generation applying to grad school or who are English language learners, whether here in the US or internationally. So we're going to have a lot of important advice for all of you, regardless of where you live, if you're looking to kind of up your next step with a graduate school application. What we're going to talk about today are the 3 documents that you'll be including, and Bernadine has some great advice on writing each of those. And then we'll add one more special tip for international applicants at the end there. Okay, so the 3 documents we'll cover today will be your letter of intent, your CV, and your writing sample. And we're just doing a couple quick strategies or tips, kind of getting Bernadine's insight and expertise here. So first question for Bernadine is, when someone's working on their letter of intent, what do you think are the main goals? What do we need to keep in mind while we're writing it?
Yeah, this is a great question. And so I run a free 10-week program here in Albuquerque, New Mexico on this path to grad school. It's a workshop for first generation college students and English language learners. And the graduate process could be so mystifying, and we don't really know how to do it if we don't have a pathway or somebody in our life to be able to tell us what to do beforehand. So this 10-week course really kind of demystifies the whole process for students, and they come out at the other end really having the tools to be able to apply to grad school. So the most important thing that I tell my students when they begin this grad school workshop is that the letter of intent is going to be the most important document that you include in the application. There's so many other things that you include in the application, like your transcripts from whatever home institution you came from, letters of recommendation, a CV, a sample writing manuscript, your TA applications. You have to pay fees for the applications. So all these other things go into completing the graduate application, but the letter of intent is really the most important because that's what graduate panels, when they're evaluating the entire application, really focus on. And so it's really, really important that writers that are applying for grad school be concise in writing their letter of intent or statement of purpose. You always want to make sure that you have the correct mailing address at the top of the letter for each school that you're applying to. You could use one letter of intent intent for all of the schools that you're applying to, but you want to make each letter very specific in terms of what their programs are, who the faculty are that are there. And so you want to make sure that you're sending the letter of intent to the right school. And so make sure that you have the right mailing address up there. That's like the first and foremost thing that I tell my students. You always want to talk about at the beginning of the letter of intent what your main research interest is in the first paragraph that will act as a thesis in your letter. So you want to really identify a field that you want to be applying to. So if you're applying to, say, a literature program, you're going to want to say, if you want to like do 20th century, 19th century. If you're applying for a biology program, you're going to want to say, I want to do stem cell biology or something. It has to be a specific field so that each department knows specifically where to funnel your application into. So you want to state, your research specialties within there as well. You want to elaborate in the statement of purpose on all of these research interests more in depthly. And, you want to really kind of sell yourself. Like, why should the people in this department, the professors in this department that are actually going over these applications, take an interest in your application? So how do you stand out? Another important aspect of the statement of purpose is actually talking about specific faculty members in that department that you want to work with and what their specialties are that are interests of yours as well. So you want to let them know that you have a vested interest in the program. You have a vested interest in the university. And kind of, show them that you know what the department is all about and how you would fit into it and how you would be unique to it as well. Another kind of main thing that I always tell students, particularly first gen, second language learners and international students, is that, we don't usually have a lot of funding in the bank. So one thing that you want to end your letter of intent with is saying that you would be a perfect candidate for a TA applicant for a TA residency. And so a TA assistantship, right? So this means that you would teach in the department and they'll see that and they'll say, oh, well, this person could teach, this person deserves funding in a certain type of way. And this is a way to be able to get your graduate career actually funded. And so you want to make sure that you say that at the end of the letter of intent. There's some other things that you should include in there, right? But these are the main things that you need to kind of include in the formula that is going to be successful for students to be able to put together a really, really great letter of intent.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bernadine. A lot of what I feel like I heard from you, especially in the beginning, is we have to be sort of specific. It can't just be, hey, I'm a great student and you've got a great program. Because you mentioned personalizing, right? Maybe it's the same general letter of intent for each place, but we're specifying and personalizing to the department's needs, how we fit in, how we're different, how we belong. Really specifically. Yeah. And then standing out. You mentioned being concise. And although, of course, we do have a lot of things we need to say, right? You gave some awesome tips about how are we going to fit with faculty interest, which faculty do we want to study with, how can we be different? How can we provide that information while also being concise? What's your advice there for how to balance that?
Yeah, I think that taking out all of the extra words like many or too much or all of these kind of like descriptive terms, I think just stripping your letter of intent of all of those descriptive words that we usually use to describe ourselves, like I'm really the best writer, right? That's such a like long sentence when you could just say I'm a good writer. And so you want to be very specific in the language, the verbs, the nouns, everything that you're using to put together that. So strip everything away to the bare bones and make it really, really concise. And I would only give yourself about 4 sentences per paragraph. And so the letter of intent is 2 to 3 pages max. And so the first paragraph is going to be about how you're a great scholar and what your specialties are going to be in the department. That's going to be about 4 sentences. The second paragraph is going to go into more in depth about what your research interests are, and that's going to be about 4 sentences. The third paragraph is going to be, this is what I've done in terms of extracurricular activities, and already this is how I'm prepared for your department. Another 4 sentences. And then you're going to end with, this is why I would be a great TA. You want to explain kind of like all of your extracurricular activities and all of your honors and things that are going to set you aside. It's going to be another 4 sentences. So a grad committee is not going to read past 2 pages. And so you just want to keep it concise and stripping that language of just the necessary words that you need.
Okay, thanks. That's a wonderful formula. And folks, you just heard an overview of everything to include. So rewind and take notes on what Bernadine listed there. We've got a couple pages max, but she also talked about what we can include in each paragraph and keeping each paragraph to 4 to 5 sentences, and also cutting the fluff. Right, we have to write concisely, and you can check out the videos on cutting fluff and using only the important verbs and nouns, on the channel as well. Okay, thank you. So when we were talking a little earlier, we talked about how the letter of intent is the most important document, but then you also shared with me that many applicants go in with maybe misleading thoughts about their CV or their resume, and that document will be required too. So how should a student or an applicant approach that CV for their grad app? Many people have not written a CV before this moment, I think.
Yeah, the CV is such a daunting task, especially when you've been in the workforce for so long. You have a resume already that's kind of tailored to what you do for life, for work, right? And a CV is just not the same thing. And I think that we should have a class probably like in college or like even in high school that tells the difference between what a resume and a CV is. And so, just briefly, a resume is a kind of concise list basically of your work experience, and a CV is a concise list of your academic experience. So you want to make sure that whatever type of work that you're putting into the CV actually relates to academia in some sort of way, right? And so there's really basics for what the CV should include, and there's certain type of formatting that you should have. So you need to have your CV, kind of be well organized and easy to read. You want to have your name at the top, kind of like a resume. But you really want to take out, all of that objective, what I'm good at kind of stuff that you have in a resume. And you want to substitute that with what is your education experience. So the education experience will go first. Do you have are you just getting out of high school? Do you have a BA? Do you have an MA? What are those things in, and what institutions did they come from? And then you're going to want to list your work experience as it relates to academia. So have you been a teaching assistant? Have you taught in elementary school programs? Have you done any type of after school programming? Have you done any manuscript editing? Have you done any type of, everything has to be really related to academia. So if you're working, say, like on reconstructing cars or something, you're not going to want to put that on there, although that's very high value work. You don't want to add that into a CV, right? You're also going to want to list your honors, any type of funding that you've gotten from the university. Have you gotten scholarships? Have you been on the dean's list? Have you done anything that you've been awarded for? And so you want to list that as well. You want to list all of your teaching experience because they're going to want to see that, especially if they're thinking about granting you a TA assistantship. And you're going to want to list resources, references that these places could actually check in with. And so the references should not be the bosses of your work. They should be teachers that you've actually worked with. They should be professors that you've, kind of associated yourself with. They should be writers. They should be in some sort of like academic field. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a professor. It could be, if you worked at a preschool or something, you could have that person as a reference as well. But it all has to kind of, the CV is basically your curriculum vitae. So that's what it stands for. And it really is the vita that is going to show how you're going to be as a scholar when you enter the grad school program that you're applying for.
Okay, great. Super helpful. Thank you. So CV stands for curriculum vitae, like she was saying. You can Google that term to see some examples. But I really like how Bernadine explained it, where most of us are familiar with a resume and it's similar, but just with the whole slant towards academics instead of all the good work we've done at businesses and wherever we've worked. And it's hard, when you're first starting out. I remember when I had to make my first very serious CV, I did not include my waitressing, but I did include when I was an assistant in a first grade special ed class, and both of those were jobs I had when I was 20, but one of them seemed like it applied and one of them didn't.
Right. Yeah, those experiences are really gonna show the committee that you shine in ways that are really relevant to the classroom, right? So even if you're a preschool teacher or assistant, right, you know how to run some sort of like classroom setting, and that will be good enough for them to be like, okay, we could put them in a teaching assistantship, because that's basically what freshman classes are anyways. But that will give them the idea that you have the knowledge and the expertise to run some sort of classroom setting.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you talked about if I worked in a preschool or whatever, I'm thinking that would help someone who's trying to get funding too, to show how much you've been around the world of education could help you achieve funding as a grad student, because you can show that you would be a good TA.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
If you're coming from like the sciences, like all of your grants and presentations and conferences, institutional services, certificates, any of that you've done should go on the CV as well.
Okay. Yeah. Great ideas. Thank you. So your third document, we've already covered your letter of intent and your CV, but of course your school you're applying to will also ask for a writing sample. And I know that will differ depending on what you're going for. So can you tell us a little about how somebody might choose a sample and what they would want to really promote in themselves in a writing sample?
Yeah, so the writing sample is really difficult. I mean, this whole process is really difficult.
Yeah.
The writing sample is really difficult because you don't really know what professors are looking for. And those are the people that are going to be evaluating your application. And so if you are going into, say, a humanities space, or you're applying to the humanities, the page limit is going to be 20 pages. They're going to want to see something that's very specific to the discipline. And so usually if programs are not interdisciplinary, where they're focusing on many different disciplines, they're going to want to see that you're focusing on the discipline that you're applying for. And so that was something that I had to learn, because I'm an interdisciplinary scholar. I use literature, I use history, I use economics, I use cultural studies all in one to write my papers. And that just didn't fly with a lot of programs that I was applying to. And so you want to be really, and I hate saying it because this is not the kind of writer or scholar that I am, but you want to be really disciplinary when you are focusing on the writing sample. You want to take something that's not such a big topic that you can't combine that and be concise in 20 pages, because that's what you're going to need for that writing sample. I think if you're applying for the sciences, they're going to want to see something that's an intervention that may not, like a hypothesis kind of findings kind of paper. And it may not necessarily even be that you actually found something new, or that you are creating this grand new thing, but that you have the will and that curiosity to explore different things in the sciences. And so I think that that's something that they really look for, is hypothesizing, and then the findings in those 20 pages. If you're doing something like political science, like the social sciences, so sociology or political science, I think the same advice would go for as the humanities, is being very discipline specific, but also kind of telling these professors or these departments that you can be interdisciplinary if they allowed it or if they required it, right? So you could be historical if you are looking into applying to a sociology department. You can be economics based if you are applying to a literature program, but you also know how to write within the discipline as well.
Yeah, thank you. So scientists were basically following the scientific method, showing that we have that curiosity and that analytic ability. Social sciences and humanities were showing, even though, like Bernadine was saying, obviously many things are intersectional in our lives and our studies, but we do have to show why we would be good in a specific department or discipline when we make these applications. Do you, when you're working with grad applicants, do you tend to talk with people who say, hey, I don't have a 20-page sample, I've never written an article, should I make one? Or do people tend to have one from a class? How do people usually approach that?
No, it's very stressful, and usually they all wait until like the last month.
Right, because it's something you want to put off, but then, yeah.
So like everyone's at least written a 5-page paper in some capacity of their life, right? Even if they didn't go to college, even just in high school, like high school teachers will have you write journals and you could like compile those together. So I just say that if you have 5 pages of something, you can turn that 5 pages into 20 pages. And so if it's a 5-page paper on, say, you're analyzing like a Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, you definitely, there's so much out there on Fitzgerald, right? And so you definitely also want to think like, do I want to submit a paper about a really conventional, very famous topic, or do I want to like go the other route and kind of like try and figure out how to make myself unique in a certain type of way? Either way is fine, right? And so if you have a 5-page paper on Fitzgerald, you could definitely, you would really want to start by reading all of the literature that's out there, all of the critique that's out there, and then inserting yourself into that critique in a different type of way. If you're writing about like a really obscure novel, then you're just going to want to kind of make an argument right away and then find all of the sources after. So it kind of depends on which route you choose. But I do think that like if you just have 5 pages, you are able to do a 20-page paper. And so it shouldn't be that daunting, even though I know it is. And I think that having somebody as a second eye to be able to read through it and just look for organization, look for kind of like, grammar errors and stuff like that to make it flow a little better, will even make you feel better after they read it, and you could sit down and then organize it in a different type of way. And yeah, it's not as daunting as it seems.
Right. I think it's manageable. Like all writing, the blank screen is the scary part. But once we have something, we can often go from there. So starting with something you have can be a great start. Yeah. And I really like, Bernadine keeps bringing us back to this theme of how can we be unique but belong? And we're showing both, right? We're showing I'd be a good addition to your department and your team, but I would have something specific to bring as well. And doing that balancing act too.
Yeah, I've sat on so many grad application committees, and we really do talk about the ones that make a unique space for themselves, right? Even if you're talking about the best, most famous modernist writers, I'm in an English department. How are you talking about it differently, right? Like, are you talking about it through intersectionality, or something like different? we're always very interested in those candidates. And so find a way to make your wedge into the disciplines in a certain type of way.
Yeah, bring a specific perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so we've covered your 3 documents, right? Your letter of intent, your CV, and your writing sample. Bernadine and I were talking a lot about how many of the viewers and folks on this channel are international students. And Bernadine also mentioned having lots of international students apply where she works. So we wanted to talk a little, if you are applying for graduate school, say in the West, from elsewhere, what do we need to keep in mind with our grad school papers and applications?
Yes, that's such a great question. And I think that at least in my department, we are very open to reading international student applications. We get so many of them. So I don't think necessarily it's the language barrier, because I know there can be a language barrier, right? Like where you're translating from your language to English. What I do think I see the most with international applications is that they're not specific enough. So they state like, oh, I've always loved to write and I've always loved to read and I want to be in your program. So maybe like a paragraph, right? And so I think really focusing on that cover letter, that statement of purpose for the graduate application, and making it as close to 2 pages as you can is really going to set you apart from all of the other international students that are applying. And so really give it some thought as to what you want to specialize in whenever you're applying to grad school. So I've seen just so many that are just very vague. They're very vapid. They're very dry. They don't have a lot of passion or intensity or any type of specificity behind it. And so I think that that would be my biggest advice to international students, is to really just focus on that letter of intent, and making it as vibrant and as as full as you can in the 2 pages.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We want the letter to help come alive, have that vibrancy, stand out. So international students, keep in mind you want to be specific here. And I would say that goes for 2 things. Bernadine talked a lot about the content, that you have something specific to study or to bring. And I would also say consider specific words. Often, if I've worked with international grad students who've had a paper rejected for a journal, I've noticed that it can be because the language is too general and vague, even down to the words. We want to avoid it is, what is it, right? Try your best to make every word specifically refer to something specific, as well as that specific content.
Yes.
Yes.
And I know that it could be definitely hard because it's a translation. I mean, it's a language thing too, right? And I really kind of relate to that as a Spanish speaker as well, where you can't really like say the word, right? Like you can't figure out what is that word that I'm trying to use in English. But so I really do like sympathize because I know how that feels, but I think just really kind of like honing in on that language and working and massaging that language as much as you possibly can. I think that that's what makes the international students stand out.
Okay, great. And when you're working hard to use strong language and be specific, if you're ever thinking, well, but I don't have anything to put here, consider an example. Maybe you just said something and it could sound general, but an example with specific language could bring it to life a little bit more.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending this time together to help our learners around the world. How can we all get to know more about you, your organization? Bernadine actually has a really awesome and meaningful book out that's brand new. So tell us all about your work and how we can find you.
Yeah, so you could find me on UNM's English department website. So you could find my email there. Behind me here, right here, is my new book. It's called Border Bodies, and it is about violence, sexual and gender violence in the 19th century borderlands. It's a heavy book, but it's a needed book, I think. And so it is published with UNC Press. You could go to UNC Press and just type in Border Bodies, and you could order it there. I also am a member of the Fronteristas Collective, which Erin had talked about earlier. And you could find us on fronteristas.site, SITE, and you could see our website there and all of the different projects that we have done in the past 4 or 5 years since we first got started in trying to abolish detention in the prison industrial complex through art and writing. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about, and that really intersects with the work that I do on borders and immigration and everything like that. So those are the different ways you could find me. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, or if you need the documents that I'm talking about, like examples, I'd also be willing to send those to viewers if you just emailed me.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. And I'll put in the site notes, the website to Bernadine's collective, if you want to learn more about it and support that. And then you can always pop a question in the comments that she and I can answer or get you the information you need. Okay, so thanks everybody. Many thanks to Bernadine for being here and all that wisdom you just shared with us. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, definitely. Good to see you. Bye, everybody. See you soon.